We now come from the highest point of Israel's history into a gradual slide into idolatry and self-reliance. And in fact, the end of Solomon's life, the chosen people of God were pleased to see the back of him. 1 Kings 11 says this: King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, you must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods. Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. This is meant to be the wisest man in the world, and he had 700 wives. That means 700 mother-in-laws. I'm not sure how wise that is. But it wasn't just the women that he accumulated. He went after their gods. He accumulated hundreds and hundreds of horses and great riches and wealth. In fact, so much so that he had to kind of put his own people under slave labour. And I don't think this was an immediate thing. I don't think that he woke up one morning and says, do you know what? I'm going to get loads and loads of girlfriends and I'm going to follow false gods. It's just a gradual slide. I had a job when I was at school, actually, in a butcher's. And part of that job was I had to slice meat as people come in off these big joints. And you put it on this slicer thing, and just as you shaved off these little slice by slice, you didn't notice. But at the end of the day, a joint like that would be reduced like that. Solomon's life at the end had reduced, so much so as slice after slice of values and ways of standards of living got shaved off. Deuteronomy 17 warned the people of God how a king should trust in God and not accumulate loads and loads of horses, because it would just tempt them to rely on their own strength rather than the power of God to save his people. The truth is, the end of Solomon's life resembled Pharaoh more than it did a royal king from God. Silver was so common that it actually lost its value. And to be generous to Solomon, I don't think he was just all the wives he accumulated. It wasn't just because he was a pervert, although there must have been some of that if you needed 300 girlfriends on top of the 700. But there were political alliances that secured his kingdom. I think he had a genuine desire to kind of establish his kingdom. But even good things that become too important can become bad things and ultimately lead you into idolatry. The desire for marriage is a good thing. The desire for a baby, or if you want promotion into a position of influence, that can be a good thing. If it's a desire to reach out to the vulnerable, or even if you want to see evidences of the kingdom of God, that's a wonderful, good thing to aspire after. But when that becomes the ultimate thing, it can become a bad thing and then lead you to idolatry. Few people have ever lived as extravagantly as Solomon. And yet we see that there's still this hole that he tries to fill with all this extravagance. Proverbs 30 verse 8, Solomon wrote this, I think, at the end of his life when he's looking back, and he says, give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonour the name of my God. We've just finished watching the Olympics, and you've watched the 100 metres on the telly, and they see them like, on your marks, get set, go. And the race starts. And then the camera doesn't pan off to the long jump or the shot put. Why? Because you don't care how the race starts. You want to know how it finishes. Solomon's life at the end was pretty disappointing. And the fact is, Solomon is the best that man can produce. Solomon is the king that is as good as it gets for us. And yet a different king is needed. A different king arrived on the scene hundreds of years later when Jesus' feet landed on this planet. Jesus was and is the ultimate king that left the privileges of eternal royalty to rescue his fallen creation. Let's strive to finish our races well. Let's ask, keeping our eyes on him so that we finish our races to the glory of God.